Welcome back to another episode of Let's Just Talk About It podcast. I am your host, Chuck. And if you're here for the first time, this platform was created to give genuine people just like you an opportunity to share a portion of your life's journey. So with that being said, I decided to do a Flashback Friday episode with my very first episode, which was about me. But this time, in a visual way, because it's been 20 years since I've been free from prison and 27 years since I've been free from a heroin addiction. So I give God praise for that. So I thought about it. How would I tell a piece of my journey in such a way that would keep my listeners' attention? So if you're anything like me, I love movies that get straight to the action. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So here goes. First of all, I grew up in a place called Cavalier Manor, a section of Portsmouth, Virginia, where growing up wasn't bad. I actually had fun as a kid because we had so many things to do in Cavalier Manor, like Little League football, Little League baseball, could go to the gym, swimming pool. It was so many kids in the area at the time. It was always something to do. But my setback came around 1992 when I decided to drop out of high school for no other reason at all than I thought I was grown and smart enough to handle life with no education. That was a wrong move. And I had great parents, but I just didn't want to listen. I wanted my own way when they was trying to tell me the right way. So now I'm a high school dropout, but I got a job at a place called Camelot Nursing Home in the kitchen, and had already started getting high off heroin before then. But when I got the job at the nursing home, I really started snorting dope every single day, not knowing that what I was developing is what's called a habit. In other words, my body needed it to function throughout the day. That what started out being fun quickly turned into a drug addiction. And at that time, I had this 1992 burgundy colored 4-door Geo Prism that I used during my lunch break to go get a bag of dope. I went to places like Lincoln Park, Otter Barber, Jeffrey Wilson, and Portsmouth. Or I would go through the tunnel to Norfolk, Virginia, to Bowling Park, places like Tidewater Park, Grandy Park, just to name a few, just to get a bag of dope. But I also had this best friend, who would come to the job and get my car to go get both of us a bag of dope. So you can imagine that mornings became more and more difficult, more and more tough to get out of bed. So if you ever use heroin, you know what I'm talking about. It's no joke. But I finally quit that job before they fired me at the nursing home because I kept missing time, due to me getting high. However, my cousin got me a job working with him at a place called Goldberg Hardware in Norfolk, Virginia, around 1994, which was another bad move for me because the hardware store was directly across the street from the projects called Young's Park or Young's Terrace, which was one of the major spots at the time that you could go find some heroin in. So now I got easy access to go get what I needed to get through the day because all I had to do was walk out the door of the job and go across the street, to Young's Park to score. And because the hardware store was independently owned, they had no problem with giving you a portion of your paycheck throughout the week. So by Friday, I was already asking for money from my next paycheck. That was a crazy time. But in the meantime, I met this girl around the early part of 1995. She lived in the city where I was from. She had 3 amazing young boys at the time, and eventually we moved in together at a place called Academy Park in Portsmouth, Virginia on Barclay Avenue. But guess what? It was another bad move for me, for the both of us, because we were both young and we were both using, and 2 people struggling with the same thing under the same roof equals problems. Because now, instead of me hustling up money for just me, now I had to hustle for 2 people. And in the midst of all that, I eventually lost my job at that hardware store because my only means of transportation got impounded, that 1992 Geo Prism, and I never got it back. You know what I mean? So now I have a drug addiction, I have no job, no money, and I'm in a relationship. So every day I'm scrambling for 2 people just to get high. until around the fall of 1995 when I met this guy who introduced me to the stick-up game, robbing. He provided the gun and the locations for me to hit to put money in my pocket at the time. You know what I mean? So now I'm out here doing crazy stuff to feed a young family and a gorilla called addiction. I call heroin a gorilla because once it gets inside of your body, it's heavy and it's hard to shake. But on February the 12th, 1996, it would be the last time I would ever hold a gun for a while or even see the streets for a while, because me and my co-defendant got caught by the police as we were trying to get away from a robbery. We was on the bus and we thought we was getting away, and they surrounded the bus with dogs and lights. They pulled the both of us out of the bus, city bus, and threw us up against the truck, the K9 truck with the dogs and so forth. They were barking, and it was crazy. And that night we both got landed in what's called 811, on the 7th floor of the Norfolk City Jail. So listen, I had a drug addiction, no money, and now I'm incarcerated with no bond. I thought it was over for me because not only was I hurting myself, but I was hurting my family. I was hurting my parents, my sister, because you think sometimes you only hurt yourself, but you hurt those that really love you and who will be there when the friends walk away. So there I was, lying on the mat on a cold jail floor on the 7th floor of 811 around people I didn't even know. I was sick. But the next day, on February the 13th, as I was lying there, trying to cope with this drug addiction, these withdrawals I was going through was painful. If you ever use, you know what I mean. Your back hurt. You go to the bathroom all the time. You just out of control. You can't think right. So as I'm laying there struggling, this older gentleman, that was there, he was a visiting preacher who came to pray with the men certain nights during the week. And he pointed at me through the cell bars. This is a true story. I never forget it. He pointed at me through the cell bars and asked me, "Hey, young man, do you want to be saved?" This is exactly what he said. And without me giving a thought, because I was in a dark place at the time, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I didn't know what was the outcome of what I did. So I'm lying there in this dark place. I felt alone. And so he pointed me out of everybody in the cell and asked me that question. And then I said yes. And I repeated this prayer after him, and I never forget it. And after I did that, I realized from that day forward, after that, I said yes to the Lord, to being saved, that out of all of the bad choices that I ever made in life, that I had finally made the right decision, because something lifted off of me. It's like the taste was gone for heroin. And believe me, I had a real taste for it. I went after that. So after I said that prayer and I accepted the Lord into my life, something lifted. The taste was gone. And I can honestly say I never looked back, that I never had another craving for heroin, because I've been clean now for 27 years, and I'm not perfect, but I'm a whole lot better than what I was. There was some dark times before then. I remember just walking around Cavalier Manor sometimes, wondering how I was gonna make it, and how I was gonna get the next, fix. And sometimes I found myself alone, just roaming the streets, because remember I told you I had no car. So I was roaming the streets, walking back and forth from the project. So that heroin addiction was very heavy on my life, but that day changed my life forever. February the 13th, 1996. I never forget it. But how, making a choice to commit a crime doesn't come without a cost, because the judge sentenced me in the same year to 10 years with 2 suspended. November the 4th, he sentenced me to 10 years with 2 years suspended. in those years after I left 8/11, I went to prisons in Virginia like Deerfield, Camp 25, Lawrenceville, St. Bride's, and I went home from Camp 4. But while I was in those places, I grew as a man. I became, more appreciative about life. I realized in those years that you only get one life to live, just one. And once that one life is gone, that's it. There's no coming back. It woke me up. So after doing 7 years and 8 months of my 8-year sentence, I came home in 2003 from Camp 4 to my family. And 20 years later, by the grace of God, I'm still here. Only by the grace of God, I'm still here. And the question I always ask my guests is, what would you say to your younger self if you could go back and prepare him for today? What would I say to Chuck if I could go back, to prepare him from the day? Number 1, don't do drugs. Number 2, avoid the prison system. However, I believe that both of those situations played a major part, played a major role in who I am today. So I would really say to my younger self, you're going to go through some lonely days. You're going to have some ups and downs. Things are not going to be the way you want them to be. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody owes you anything. But God's got you. He got you. And I want to give a special shout out to my mom and dad, and my sister who stuck by me during my addiction and incarceration. I want to thank you and give you a special shout out because you stuck by me when nobody else did. And I really appreciate that. And someone who's listening right now, you may have a son or daughter who's going through an addiction or maybe an incarceration. I want to encourage you to never stop praying for them. Never stop praying for them, because God's hands are way bigger than ours and can go places like prison to rescue your children. And there also may be some parents who may have lost your children due to overdose. Doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. Is that sometimes we as children, we make choices that, have ripple effects on our family. So you did nothing wrong. We just make choices. But to those parents whose children are still around, don't give up on them. Keep praying for them. You never know what can happen. Look at me. If God can change me, he can change anybody. So yeah, don't give up. And so I want to say, as always, thank you so much for tuning in to Let's Just Talk About It podcast. Please check out my website. Just Google Let's Just Talk About It podcast.com and make sure you hit that subscribe button to receive all the new episodes every Friday. You can also find me on Facebook. Just type in Chuck LJTAI, which means Let's Just Talk About It. So as always, until next time, don't hold it in, but let's just talk about it. Talk to you soon.
A part of your weekly listening pleasure. The stories that are being shared here, don't hold